Hey everyone, Mark Meckler here, and it is once again Sunday night and time for the BattleCry. It's my favorite time of week because I get to hang out with you guys. We get to talk about all the stuff that happened during the week. We get to talk about what's coming up in the next week, and mostly I get to hear from you guys. That's my favorite part of the BattleCry. But we are going to start with the way that we always start, which is a call to action, but I'm going to do something unusual, which is I'm going to repeat last week's call to action. Why am I going to do that? Because I think it's that important. You might have seen the buzz in the news. There's a whole bunch of people telling Elon that instead of forming a third party, what he really ought to do is join Convention of States. Come support COS. Help us call the world's first, the country's first Convention of States. You can see Winston just came in. He really wants to do this as well. Doc's there in the background, just got up on the couch. He came to talk to you guys about this. We want Elon to join Convention of States. The way you do that is you post on X and you tag it with @Elon and ask Elon to join Convention of States. So look at our, follow us there. We're hashtag COS Project, @COS Project. Follow us there and forward our posts, repost our posts, and tag @Elon because we want him paying attention. I'm pretty sure he is paying attention now. I've heard some stuff. So we just want to keep that rolling. Again, I don't normally do this 2 weeks in a row, but we want to keep the momentum rolling. And it's up to you guys to do that. I can only do so much by myself. So I need you guys, again, post on X, follow @COS Project, repost our stuff, and tag @Elon. And I want to talk a little bit more about Elon sort of generally. And I know a lot of people are mad at Elon, and I think there's reason for that. I mean, people are mad at him because he's hashing on President Trump, and they're mad at him because he's talking about a third party. But I just want to say that I actually can relate. Not right now so much, but I can feel Elon's pain. And the reason I can feel the pain is I had a similar experience back in 2010. So in 2009, I was one of the people blessed to be involved at the very genesis of the Tea Party movement. I founded with my co-founder, Jenny Beth Martin, the Tea Party Patriots, who built that up to be the largest Tea Party org in the nation. And in 2010, we saw something historic. A lot of you were involved. Congress flipped. Literally 62 seats flipped from Democrat to Republican. That's the biggest flip in Congress since 1938. It was incredible. It was historic. It was amazing. I was on Capitol Hill for election night. And what I believed in that moment was that everything was going to change. And the reason I believe that is we had just won this historic election and we had flipped Congress and we had sent this very clear message of what we wanted: fidelity to the Constitution, free markets, fiscal responsibility. And I expected Congress was going to deliver. And instead, what they did was nothing, really. I mean, really nothing. Nothing changed. And so what I see in Elon is a guy that invested his time, his heart, his money, and his primary goal was to try to set the country on a sustainable fiscal path, to reduce debt, to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, to help deregulate, to set the free market free, to do what America can do, what only America can do. And he did all of this stuff and put all this time and energy in at great cost to himself, by the way. It cost him massive amounts of stock valuation in his companies. You might remember people attacking Tesla dealerships, people vandalizing Teslas, all this stuff at personal cost to Elon. And he was successful. He was. He helped elect President Trump. He helped elect a majority in Congress. And so he thought he was ready to go. He got appointed head of Doge. I think that's a great thing. I think Doge was and is still a great thing. Doge found literally hundreds of billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And he expected that Congress would cut all that stuff. He expected that Congress would cut spending. But like me, he was very disappointed. Like when push came to shove, when the reality on the ground was revealed, it was revealed that the swamp is much deeper than either of his thoughts. So Elon's frustration and Elon's disappointment to me is I could just relate. I mean, I understand where he's coming from. Now, I want to be really clear. I don't agree with the solution that he's looking at. Like the idea of a third party, I just don't think that's going to work. I've been studying third-party efforts since before I was involved in the Tea Party movement. History tells us they don't work, and they tend to empower exactly the people that you don't want to empower. So I just don't think this is the right way to go. And I think he's missing the nature of the problem, which for Elon Musk is a little bit surprising. But again, I have empathy for him. I've been there. What he's missing is that this is a structural problem. And Elon should be able to see this from a business perspective. The structure of the federal government is broken. We've broken that structure over the last 115, 120 years or so. We've taken what were 17 enumerated powers given to the federal government, and we've given them, I don't know how many, 17,000. some ridiculous amount of powers that they now have. They have power over things they were never intended to have power over. They have power over education and energy and healthcare and housing and agriculture. None of these things were intended to be in the hands of the federal government. They were not in the enumerated powers. Those powers were given to the federal government by the courts. And if we want to fix all that, that's a structural issue. It's not an electoral issue. Human beings are incentive machines. They work according to incentives, and there is no incentive to cut the federal government. There is no incentive to balance the budget. There is no incentive for folks to limit their own terms. There is no incentive for those in Washington, D.C. to take away their own power. And so they won't. Just on a broad scale, we might find a few who are willing to fight for that, but most of them won't. And so if we want to fix this, we have to use the mechanism that the framers gave us, and that's calling for a convention of states under Article 5 of the United States Constitution. It was put there for this time. The framers told us the federal government at some point is going to get out of control and you're going to have to do something about it. We have to give you the power to do that. They gave us the second clause of Article 5 to do that. Elon is smart enough to understand this, but right now, I think he might be too frustrated to look at it. I hope he's looking at it. I'm counting on you guys to help him look at it. But I just want to say I do empathize with him. I understand his frustration, his anger. I get all of that. I mean, honestly, I still feel the same way. And the pain that I felt started back in 2010, but I understand his frustration. But if we don't fix this structural problem, just like in a business, if Elon's running a business and he's got a bad structure in the business and he puts a bunch of good people in the business, but doesn't give them the power to fix the structure, if the incentives aren't there for them to fix the structure, then they won't, and you'll get a bad result. So Elon, we're calling on you. All of our folks want you on board. We would appreciate having you on board. Way better than fighting with Donald Trump, honestly, would be to help a convention of states, called the first ever convention of states in American history. The invitation's open. The chair right next to me is here. I'm happy to have you by our side and by the side of the millions of grassroots people that already support convention of states. All right, moving on. We've got a big debacle going on right now at the level of our federal government. In the administration, I hate to say this, I am very happy with the administration. That's the part I like to say. I am frustrated with the handling of the Epstein mess. And I think I'm reflective of almost everybody I talk to. We're hearing from the administration, we shouldn't worry about it. We shouldn't think about it. We shouldn't care about it. I disagree with that. I think we should worry about it. We should care about it. For literally years, Donald Trump told us this was a big deal. For literally years, Kash Patel said it was a big deal. Pam Bondi said it was a big deal. Dan Bongino said it was a big deal. And they said they were going to turn over the list and the files and all of this stuff. And they built this thing up. And I lay most of this at the feet of Pam Bondi. She said all of these things. She said that she had the list on her desk. She said that she had the files. She said that she was going to release those. She wanted Hannity's show, made a big deal out of it. And what happened? Nothing. So it's kind of like the previous thing I was talking about. When you think something big is going to happen and nothing happens, people get frustrated. So I think a lot of us out here are frustrated. Again, I think that falls mostly at the feet of Pam Bondi, but I don't think that the right way to handle it is to say that people that won't just let it go are not loyal MAGA. They're not President Trump fans. They're, whatever people are saying about them. I don't agree with that. I think it's reasonable for people to expect more disclosure. And I'm hoping that it's coming. Now, I saw a story that broke late this week that said that I'm not worried about appointment of a special prosecutor. I don't think that's going to do anything. Pam Bondi said, the president asked, and Pam Bondi said she's going to go to the right judge and try to get the grand jury report released. Now, why is this important? President Trump has been calling the Epstein thing for the last week a hoax. And so I don't think he means that nothing happened. And so I think there's something really important that I want you to make a distinction on if you can. When he's calling it a hoax, I think what I'm guessing when they dug into those files, what they found is a bunch of stuff that had been placed in those files over the last 4 years to be like ticking time bombs. Now, this might sound outrageous to you, but let's remember the Steele dossier, the Russia collusion hoax, all of this stuff, all these scandals built by our intelligence agencies to take down Donald Trump. Let's remember that for the last 4 years, the left, the Biden administration, Merrick Garland as the AG did nothing about the Epstein files. They didn't do a thing. I want you to remember this. Nothing was released. Zero. It's possible. I'm not saying this has happened, but it's possible that the files have been stuffed with a bunch of stuff that would be intentionally damaging to Republicans. So what do you do about that? Do you just say, well, we're not going to release the files? That's probably not a good idea. That's not going to satisfy American public opinion, American curiosity, and frankly, America's right to know. What you do, and this is something to understand the legal nuance, is you go back to the grand jury proceeding and you ask for that to be unsealed. Now, why go back to the grand jury proceeding? Because the grand jury proceeding is going to be the purest form of the Epstein case on the accuser side, on the government side, that you could possibly see. Why do I say that? Because when a district attorney presents a case to the grand jury, it's presented in a sealed environment. In other words, that's not public testimony. It's not for trial. And by the way, no rebuttal. There's no witness for the defense. There's no counsel for the defense. This is the prosecution putting on the very best case with the very best evidence that they could possibly find. And that has now been essentially hermetically sealed since that grand jury indictment against Jeffrey Epstein. So that's the best evidence that the government can put on. That can't be tampered with. It hasn't been tampered with for the last 4 years. We know that. It's just testimony. It's just evidence that was sealed up after the indictment was handed down from the grand jury. So by revealing the grand jury testimony, the grand jury evidence, all of that stuff, now they're going to scrub it, by the way, of some of the witness names. They're going to scrub it of the victims' names because we don't want the victims to have to be dragged through that. They're going to scrub it of some of the accused names. Now, people are going to say, oh, that's horrible. They're going to scrub it of some of the accused names. But I want you to think about this. If somebody is wrongly accused of pedophilia, they haven't been convicted of pedophilia, they've never been charged with pedophilia, but somebody says, oh, they were there with Epstein and young girls, they will never be able to clear their name. They don't have the right to a trial. They've never been charged. People didn't think there was enough evidence against them to charge them. It's just a bald-faced, straight-up accusation, right? Nothing else. And we can't, in our justice system, allow that stuff to just float around because it really will destroy people's lives. I think some people, where there's enough evidence, I think that might be revealed. But there are going to be redactions in this, and we're going to have to be satisfied with that. There's only so much we're going to get according to our constitutional legal process. But I do think the grand jury transcripts, along with grand jury evidence, are going to be the best snapshot we're going to get of the best case against Jeffrey Epstein and whoever else cooperated with him. So that's what President Trump is asking for. I think it's the right move. I think it's starting to help to soften what's been going on. I still think Pam Bondi did a terrible job on this. By the way, I'm not one calling for Pam Bondi to step down. Like, people make mistakes, people screw things up. You hold them accountable. What I hope is that Pam Bondi comes out and says, hey, I made some mistakes here in the way I did this. I think that's the way you do it if you want to restore public trust. And then you reveal the grand jury transcript and all that stuff, and you have radical transparency from there on out. So that's my hope of what happens to turn the Epstein debacle into whatever it's actually supposed to be. I'm going to openly admit, I don't know what it is. All these people who say they know what it is and they know there's world leaders involved, all this, I don't know. One thing I feel like I'm generally honest about, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what's in those files. I don't know what actually happened. I'm not going to pretend that I do. I'm going to call for radical transparency because I'd like to know, along with all of you. As all of this stuff is going on, I want to encourage you to not get distracted. It's easy to get distracted. We can get mad at President Trump or mad at Pam Bondi or mad at whomever, and they're covering pedophilia, whatever is being said. Remember, all of that stuff is being said by the radical left in America who hate President Trump, who illegally tried to destroy President Trump, who have been trying to destroy President Trump for roughly 10 years now. And they're the ones promoting all this stuff. Now, again, I'm not saying you shouldn't be curious. I'm not saying you shouldn't want to know. I think you should. But don't make that your focus. There is a lot of stuff going on, and you should always keep your eye on the prize. If you're conservative like me, what you should be looking for, what you should be fighting for is more conservative policy victories, because we've had a bunch of them. I think there are more to come. Every day that this administration is in office matters. I don't know what comes after this administration. You don't know what comes after it. This is, in my lifetime, the best administration in my entire life. They're doing more for this country, more for average Americans, more on the foreign policy stage, better than any administration in my lifetime. Every single day Trump has in office matters. right? So we're now in July of the first year of a 4-year term. We got 5 months left in this first year of the 4-year term, and his term will be 25% over. And I want to see action, action, action all the way to 100% of his term. That's really what I'm focused on. So I'm keeping my eyes and my ears on the prize, and the prize is more conservative policy victories. By the way, we are getting those. We're getting conservative policy victories. I think people overlook how great these victories are. People were frustrated with the OBBB, the one big beautiful bill. It spends too much. It bloats government. I agree with all of that stuff, but I also think got to be realistic. How much are you going to get with the bare majorities we have in the House and the Senate? And we got some incredible stuff in the one big beautiful bill. Got a bunch of defunding of a bunch of terrible, terrible stuff. We got money for the border wall. We got money for ICE. We're seeing deportations up. We're seeing border crossings at basically zero, right? I mean, this is incredible stuff. So we should celebrate those things. And in the last week, what do we see? We saw a rescission bill. By the way, I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen a rescission bill. Have you ever seen that? I can't recall ever seeing that. Certainly not since I've been paying attention to politics. They're rescinding spending. $9 billion. And people will say, oh, well, $9 billion, it's not that much. And yeah, I get that. In the scheme of things, on our total national debt, our deficit, $9 billion is a drop in the bucket. But, and this is really important, we defunded NPR. We defunded PBS. How long have conservatives been complaining about that? I could say, honestly, my entire political life, as long as I've been paying attention to politics, people have been complaining that PBS and NPR are politically biased leftist organizations. I think they get worse every single year. And we have now defunded those. This president defunded those. This Congress defunded those. I think that's extraordinary. That is anti-American, anti-conservative, anti-religious, anti-traditional values propaganda being paid for with your tax dollars. No more. I can barely contain my excitement over that. That's absolutely an incredible victory. So I think some of the time what we do is we're so used to what I call the panic porn, the negative stuff. Oh my God, what's going on is so bad. And we're not doing this and we're not doing that. And we're not seeing the Epstein files, that we forget we're having all these great victories. How do I know we're having great victories? Because the left is freaking out. And the left's standard line on all this stuff is, if Republicans do X, people will die. Millions of people will die. And that's what they've been saying about PBS and NPR. Oh, like, where will you get your weather information from if there's a weather emergency? I have a question for you. Any of you, all of you. When was the last time that you listened to NPR, PBS for weather emergency information? Look, I just went through a huge weather emergency here in the hill country of Texas. Patty and I were driving around this week, and a creek near us flooded in a devastating manner. There's still body search operations going on. No more rescue. It's all recovery. And if you look down the creek, you can't believe what it looks like. It looks like a tornado blew through there. Trees blown over, houses gone, cars in the creek. It's absolutely unbelievable. NPR? I never even thought about turning on NPR. You know why? Because, oh yeah, I have one of these, a cell phone. I was getting weather information, weather alerts regularly on my cell phone. I'm sure you guys were too, if you live in our area. I'm sure that's where you get your weather from. Maybe you get it from cable television, possibly. I don't know. But for me, mostly it's the cell phone. It's the internet. For those who have Starlink, it's Starlink up to the satellites, right? And so nobody is using NPR and PBS. I haven't seen one person online said, oh my God, I don't know where I'm going to get my weather information anymore. I mean, so this is crazy stuff going on out there. Good stuff for us, bad stuff for the left. We should celebrate this stuff. Also in the rescission bill, we're sending a whole bunch of crazy NGO spending for crazy lesbian dance theory study kind of stuff overseas, all around the world. Billions of dollars of this money, of your money, that will not be spent on this crazy kind of stuff. Promises made by President Trump when he was running, promises kept. You know, I was in the White House about, 4 or 6 weeks ago, and I happened to be in the Office of Domestic Policy Counsel, and I was told that they said, we consider this office the office of promises kept. They track the promises the president has made, and they continue to try and make sure that they are honoring those promises. And I think that's absolutely incredible. So just pay attention. Don't get distracted. Promises made, promises kept. Again, I'm not trying to distract you away from the Epstein stuff. I think we need more information there. I think we're going to get more information, but focus on the wins because there's a lot of wins coming. Speaking of wins, or at least complex, maybe wins, Israel, Syria, and Gaza update. Now, you guys know this is a subject matter I'm interested in. I'm following what's going on online, not just on the world stage, but the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States, which is just absolutely extraordinary now. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to talk about what's actually going on the ground right now in Israel, Syria, and Gaza. I have a lot of friends over in Israel, so I get news from them pretty regularly. I don't have to just get it from the media, but I do get it from folks on the ground. And what I can tell you is, first of all, Israel is paying a heavy price. They're going into Gaza. They're continuing to clear out every week. More young Israeli men are being killed. When I say young, I get the death reports back, 18 to 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds losing their life in Gaza, cleaning out the terror infrastructure in Gaza. And I want you to understand what they're doing. They're going into tunnels and clearing out the tunnels. They're going into booby trap buildings. These are people inside Gaza. By the way, it's not Palestine. There's never been a Palestine in all of human history. There's never been a country or territory that was actually called Palestine. This has been controlled by all kinds of different empires over the centuries. Israel was created by the British Mandate back in 1948. And so this is just important historical stuff, but they're going in and they're clearing out people who are sworn to the destruction of the entire state of Israel. They were given Gaza back in 2005 with billions of dollars of infrastructure there. They destroyed it. They took billions of dollars from all over the world and built terror infrastructure instead of taking care of their people. This should be the jewel of the Mediterranean. It still can be, but because you had Hamas running it, elected by the people there, it turned into a one-eyed monster, and the eye was aimed at Israel and destroying Israel. So Israel's doing what they have to do. No state can have a terror state on their border. They're going to clear that hive of villainy out. They're doing the most humanitarian job they possibly can. No army in the history of the world, literally, I can say this unequivocally, I've read the reports, has actually acted in such a humanitarian aid. No army feeds their enemies. No army drops leaflets on their enemies constantly and consistently, calls their enemies on their cell phone and says, hey, you need to clear out these buildings because we know there's terrorist infrastructure there. We've got to get rid of the building. That's the way the Israelis behave. They have field hospitals there. They treat Palestinians who are injured. If you want to hear a great story about this, read Bridget Gabriel's work. When she was somebody who hated Israelis and then came to see them face to face and became a huge supporter of Israel, became a newscaster in Israel because she saw that the Israelis are some of the most humane people on earth. So what's going on? They're continuing to clear out Gaza. They can now control militarily about 65, 70% of Gaza. They're going to go to 100%. They are going to clean that thing up. They will have full military control, and Gaza will never attack Israel again. That's how it should be. Now, on another one of their borders, they have problems with Syria. The Syrian government was overthrown. Turkey helped in that overthrow, and now you have a radical Islamic dictator in office there. Bashar Assad, I was no fan. He was a dictator. He was a tyrant, but now you have an Islamic theocracy tyrant in charge. It's just a messy area of the world. And they've started attacking the Druze. Now, the Druze are a community. They're not Jewish, by the way. There's a lot of Druze in Israel. They started attacking the Druze community in Syria. The new Syrian leadership did. The Bedouin tribes that were there. It is a very tribal area. And Israel has stepped in to defend the Druze on behalf of their Druze population in Israel. They did this because they have respect. They have religious plurality in Israel, and they have respect for their Druze brothers and sisters, citizens of Israel. And they are now protecting the Druze in Syria. And unbelievably, you have the international media saying that this is somehow a bad thing. They're not talking about the fact that the new Syrian terrorist government, that the Bedouins are trying to create a complete and total ethnic cleansing of Syria to wipe out the Druze. The media is not talking about that. I'm going to talk about it because it is actual genocide, unlike what's going on in Gaza, which is where they move the civilian population, try not to harm the civilian population. They're literally slaughtering the civilian Druze population. The Israelis have stepped in, again, demonstrating their humanity. I'm so impressed with what Israel's doing there. How sick is the world press? Very sick, terribly sick, horribly sick, completely anti-Semitic. And we see the rise of that anti-Semitism in the United States of America. We should be very cautious about this. It has never worked out well when anti-Semitism has risen in any country. And I'm not just talking about for the Jews. It's never worked out well for the country. We need to push back on that. We need to stomp that out in the United States of America. People can say whatever they want, but if they say things that are false, which so many of these people are, I'm certainly going to speak out against it, and you should speak out against it too. I'm specifically going to refer here briefly to Tucker Carlson, who I've known for a very long time, and it saddens me greatly to see what he's doing. And he has this device that he uses that I think is entirely dishonest, where he says, "Oh, I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions." He's not asking questions. He's positing theories like blood libel against the Jews that have been used literally for centuries. And he's not asking questions. And if you want to see how he's not asking questions, watch 2 interviews back to back. Watch him interview Ted Cruz, and then watch him interview the president of Iran. Ted Cruz, he hammers on him. He pushes him. He tries to cram him into a corner. He asks gotcha questions. What's the population of Iran? I mean, he's just hammering on Cruz. And then he interviews the president of Iran, who is openly, obviously, blatantly, and completely lying. And Tucker doesn't push him on one thing. Not one thing. Tucker's like, I'm just asking him questions. No, you're being dishonest. You're trying to present Ted Cruz in a bad light, and you're trying to present the president of Iran, a terror-supporting regime that calls for death to America, that hates Israel, that hates America, that hates the West, that throws gays off of buildings, that considers women property. You're holding them up in a bright light, and you're trying to attack Ted Cruz in the United States of America. It's just dishonest, and we should watch out for that. All right. Speaking of dishonest, I didn't mean to do this, but I'm going to turn to Chip and Joanna Gaines. And they're the founders of a show called Fixer Upper. You might remember it. I was a big fan of the show many years ago. Really liked the Gaineses. One of the things I really loved about the Gaineses is they were very wholesome Christian folks. That's their image. That's what they presented. They presented themselves as church-going Christians. And now it seems like instead of being the host of Fixer Upper, they need a lot of fixing up. Because they have a new show. It's called On the Frontier. It's 3 families trying to relive 1800s frontier life. And one of those families is a gay couple with 2 young boys. And the question I have is, one, is that biblical? Do we really need to do that? Do the Gaineses who profess to be professing Christians, do they need to promote a gay family with 2 young boys? 2 young boys, by the way, who were created artificially, right? These men purchased a woman's womb, to use a woman's womb to make 2 babies for them, to intentionally deprive those babies, those young boys, of a mother. That's how that whole thing came to be. Whatever you think about that, you might support that. You might say it's none of our business. You might like that. The one thing I know for sure is that's not Christian. That's not within the Christian faith. Christian says homosexuality is a sin. Christian faith says that marriage is between a man and a woman. It just says it in black and white. Again, it doesn't matter whether you like it or not. That's what the Bible says, and it says it throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it says those things. Why would Christians like Chip and Joanna Gaines be promoting that? And the 2 men on the show have come out publicly, and they've said that the reason they're excited to be on the show is to normalize this, to normalize gay marriage, to normalize 2 gay men purchasing children and raising children in a gay household. That's their point. And Chip and Joanna Gaines are supporting this. And the blowback has been unbelievable. Like literally thousands and thousands and thousands of comments on social media, on Chip Gaines's feed, on Joanna Gaines's feed, on the Magnolia feed. That's their company. Anytime they post about this show, they're just getting buried. And then Chip Gaines, instead of thinking about, well, what am I doing? Maybe what I'm doing is not very Christian, double down by saying that the Christians who are commenting negatively on this are essentially bad Christians. That's what he said. We're supposed to love our neighbors, but love our neighbors, I agree with that fundamentally, absolutely, but it doesn't mean we're supposed to actually indulge them in their sin and promote their sin. And whether the sin is gay marriage, 2 men being married instead of a man alone, or lust or envy or greed or whatever that sin is, they're all equal. This is not any worse, but we don't promote those sins as Christians. We're not supposed to promote those sins as Christians. At best, we should rebuke our brothers and sisters privately when they're engaged in those sins and say, hey, it's not great. We should always remember we have a plank in our own eye, right? In other words, we are all sinners, but we should help people to get off the path of sin and on the path to righteousness. The Gaineses are not doing that. I've seen a push by Megan Basham of the Daily Wire about this. I've seen the push on their church, which is called the Antioch Church, to make a statement about this. We haven't seen any statement from their church in Waco, Texas. And I encourage you to follow this and to think about this in your own life. Like, if you cross paths with this kind of stuff, you're going to elevate it? Are you going to allow that in your own life? Or are you going to talk to people about it and be honest about it? Hey, that's sinful. It's not biblical. We love you. We'll pray for you. We're certainly not going to promote that in our church or in our family or whatever it is. Again, you accept and love the people because they're the ones doing the sin, and that's not on you. That's between them and God. But you don't elevate it and support it, and that's what the Gaineses are doing. I think this is an absolute mess for them. I don't know if their brand ever recovers. I'll be curious to see what they do. When Chip spoke out against Christians being too judgmental, the blowback was 10 times worse than the initial scandal. So we'll see what happens out of it. He's been pretty quiet since then. The church's been quiet. Joanna has been quiet. I don't know what happens. Let's talk about this week in COS. I was traveling for COS this last week. I was headed out to Indianapolis, and it was a long day, right? So sometimes I fly out super early in the morning. I was flying out of Austin on a 5 a.m. flight on American Airlines, which meant the alarm went off at 2:45 a.m. Oh, I don't know about you guys, but that's too early for me. I used to be able to do that when I was younger. It was painful. So up at 2:45, out of the house by 3:20, and headed to the airport. Get to the airport around 4:00 a.m. It's early. I did have coffee on the way, so I was okay. You don't have to worry about me. I'm okay. Got there, got on the plane, and then I'm just going to say, because it's American Airlines, it was delayed. How do you have the first flight of the day delayed? How does that? It was not a weather delay. It was a mechanical delay. Didn't they know the night before there was something wrong with the plane mechanically? How do they not know that? Mechanical delay. I'm always okay with a mechanical delay. I want them to be safe. I still don't understand how it happens on the first flight of the day. And then they delayed us further. Now, I was flying from Austin to Dallas and then Dallas to Indianapolis. So I had to make a connection in Dallas, had plenty of time. The flight, by the way, from Austin to Dallas is 37 minutes. So should be able to make this no problem. But then they delayed the flight for over an hour. Why? Because catering hadn't arrived with ice and water. Yeah, that's right. They held the plane for ice and water for over an hour. I got taken to Dallas. I missed my Dallas flight to Indianapolis. They were kind enough to rebook me. I have to give them credit for that. At 9:35 p.m., arriving the next day at 12:15 a.m. So this is ridiculous. I missed my meetings, needless to say. I went to catch a flight back home. I went up to the customer service line, 25 people, 2 customer service agents, people yelling, people mad, people leaving. Oh, what a mess. I finally got a flight home at 9:05 a.m. back to Austin because I had missed my meetings. And so this is what happens. This is like the glory and the romance and the luxury of travel, right? Today for politics. Anyway, I got on the plane to come home. That plane sat on the tarmac for over an hour. Thank you, American Airlines. I'm just going to say it directly. American Airlines sucks. Don't fly American Airlines. It's terrible. It's the worst. It's absolutely horrible. I tagged them on my social media posts. Of course, they never responded. I'm sure they could just get flamed every day. I flew them because it was my only flight. They got me in on time. If I went that morning, I'm just not going to, I'll do that. I'll stay at a hotel next time. I'll go the night before on another airline. I just don't want to fly American Airlines anymore. And I pity you if you're flying American Airlines. All right, we're going to go to our Q&A. But before we do that, there's a couple of things I want to remind you of. First of all, if you want more news, valuable information, the calls to action delivered straight to you, sign up at conventionestates.com/BattleCry list. That's conventionestates.com/BattleCry list. Make sure you never miss the BattleCry information. Make sure you never miss the call to action. And I want to make sure that you always hear what I have to say on the BattleCry on Sunday nights. Get a chance to ask your questions, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell. Otherwise, you might miss stuff like this. I want to make sure you sign that open letter to Elon Musk, tag him in your post, but also go to conventionofstates.com/Musk. And that letter is going to go to Musk with all the signatures we get. Make sure you also buy your swag. This is, by the way, we promoted this on the email this week. It's the COS Convention of States. I like it in army green. It comes in black too. It's got the COS logo on one side, the flag on the other side. This is actually my favorite COS shirt. I have 2 of them because I like it so much. I wear it all the time. Mine's a little bit faded because it's been worn so many times, but if you want this kind of swag, you can get it. This is my COS Race to Freedom. I love this hat. It's so cool. It's a new hat we have. It's called the Race to Freedom hat. Can you see that? Cool logo on the front. And this is in honor of our summit, which is taking place in Indianapolis, the 18th through the 20th of September. If you haven't signed up for that, ask your state leadership team. If you're a Convention of States activist, you can come to our summit. It's going to be really awesome. And last but not least, if you want to ask me a question, you can do that by going to conventionofstates.com/ask Mark, conventionofstates.com/ask Mark. Get out there. Ask me some crazy stuff. You guys are just so calm and mature, and you never ask me the silly things. We'll have to have producer G do that again soon. George Kirkman asked, buy or sell? Elon Musk needs to take a page from the George Soros playbook. Instead of forming a third party, he needs to support candidates inside both the Republican and Democrat Party. That's not a bad idea, especially in places where you have Democrats are going to win the seat no matter what. Maybe you can elect more reasonable Democrats and start to drive the Democrat Party off or from the far left where they're way off the rails. Left, it's this hand, Mark. They're way off the rails. Maybe you can bring them back to left of center instead of left of left. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. That is kind of the George Soros playbook. So I don't think that would be so bad, but the main thing I'd like to see him do instead, support Convention of States. Rob Bleakney says, would you like to see President Donald Trump consider presiding over an Article 5 convention as a way of encouraging amendments that would tend to preserve his legacy? Yeah, I would have no problem with that. Any convention, by the way, will elect its own officers. They could elect President Trump as the presiding officer of the convention. I'm not sure if he would want to do that or not, but it would certainly be historic, and we would certainly probably get some good stuff. Don't forget the call to action on the BattleCry, which is to go to X, to post stuff about Convention of States, follow us at COS Project, hashtag us at COS Project, and when you post about COS Project, make sure that you tag Elon Musk at Elon. There we go. I got the words out of my mouth. This is the Sunday Night BattleCry. It's been a good one. I'm glad to have you guys here. Don't be discouraged. Be encouraged. Celebrate the victories. Fight for more. And I'll see you next week on the BattleCry.